Hello and welcome to chapter 5 of Tender Warrior, a man in his breastplate. Obviously, he's talking about the warrior, and the ancient warrior would wear that breastplate, even as the modern warriors wear the plate vest to protect them from the enemy's bullets. And so we think of that breastplate representing toughness. But the question is, what do you have under that breastplate? A warrior is not one who is tough and mean through and through, macho, but he is one who is tenderhearted. A true warrior is not afraid to express his emotions, and he's not afraid to admit his failures, his insecurities, even his fears. Now, we as men think sometimes that it shows weakness if we admit we have fears, if we admit we have insecurities. We don't want people to think we're weak. We think we have to be and appear to be strong at all times with our wife and with our children and other men. But what we see in this chapter is that we as men must be willing to be vulnerable, to open up. Now, your wife knows you have fears. And so you might as well admit those to her, and she'll love you for it more and actually respect you more because she knows you have them. And when you won't admit it, that makes her lose respect. So you need to feel free to share with your wife your struggles and your fears so she can pray for you, so she will feel closer to you. And there's nothing wrong with expressing to your children who are of the appropriate age some concerns you may have, some insecurities even, and ask them to pray for you. Again, if they think that dad never has any fears, any insecurities, any worries, then they'll think, well, especially sons, I can't have any worries. I've got to be a man who doesn't worry, who's never afraid. And that's just not the case. We're all afraid at times and insecure. And so as you are meeting this week, talking about that tender side of the warrior, I want you to think about Paul. Now, he was tough. He went against odds. He was stoned and left for dead 3 times. And what did he do? He got back up and went into the very town that stoned him. And that took courage. Paul did not flinch from the enemy. He was indeed tough, but he was not one who was macho. He was also tender. He had a tender side. The very Paul that was so tough wrote 1 Corinthians 13 about love. And you read that, you'll see love is not selfish. Love does not remember wrong done against it. Love is not jealous. And he goes on to talk about the tenderness of love. And if you look at his relationship with the Thessalonians, he talks about having a fond affection for them, as he mentions in the book. And so a true warrior, he is tough, but he is not soft. And there's a difference between being manly and being tender and being soft. And we're not talking about soft, we're talking about tenderness. True tenderness comes from strength, not from weakness. Let me ask you this. Who can be more tender with a baby? A 3-year-old trying to pick that baby up, or you as a grown man? A 3-year-old will grab that baby, try to pull it, try to pick it up, be rough with it because he's not strong enough to be tender. But you who are stronger can be very tender with that baby. And so tenderness actually comes from a position of strength. In fact, Jesus says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Now, that word meek, it doesn't mean weak. It was actually used to describe a wild horse, a stallion that had been broken. Now, he was still just as strong as he ever was, but his will, his strength was brought under control. And so meekness is strength under control. It's not weakness. It is strength, just as strong as you ever were, but that strength is under the control of the Holy Spirit and under your control. And so tenderness comes from a position of strength. Don't forget that. Now, we all have areas that we tend to put up that facade, that front that we don't want to admit. One of the things that might be good for you to discuss in your group is what areas are you finding hard to be vulnerable and open with one another, with your wife, perhaps even with your children. Talk about that. Also, men need community. We want community, we need community. You notice the football players, when they do something great, they'll slap each other on the behind. I'll give a high five. You know, we need the closest. We need other men we can be truthful with, we can be honest with. Even as David and Jonathan had that very close relationship, we need a good friend. Do you have one? It's been said most men will not have over two or three great friends in a lifetime. Are you fortunate to have one? A man that you can share with, that will hold you accountable and you will hold him accountable. That's a dear treasure. I hope that you and your group can hold each other accountable and can develop those trusting relationships. And so men need community. We need each other and we need to admit it. Christianity is not a Lone Ranger experience. It's a community. So I hope you're developing that in your group. You might talk about what can we do to develop more community in our group. Do I feel free to call up one of you and tell you if I'm struggling, if I'm having a difficult time? If not, what can we do to develop that relationship? Is it anyone in your group that if you needed them at 3 a.m. in the morning, you would feel free to call them and to say, I need your help? Is there anyone in that group, anyone in your group that you'd be willing to do that? Is there anyone you know that you'd be willing to call at 3 a.m. if you had an issue and saying, I need you? Can you meet me? Can you come help me? I hope you do. So as you talk about tenderness, I want you to just think about, are you showing that tender side to your family, first of all? Are you showing it to your children? Man, a dad loves on his kids. He hugs them. He's appropriate with them in his touch, but he's affectionate. Your kids need that. Your daughters need a hug from you. They need to know that you love them. And appropriate touch is a powerful way to show that love. Now, as your boys get older, they're never too old to hug. I hug my grown boys right now. I hug my grandkids. I mean, I bear hug them. I want them to know that you're never too old to hug. I think I've said before that when I got about 10 years old, my dad, I remember it was just as good as if it was yesterday. He'd been somewhere and I went up to hug him and he stuck out his hand to give me a handshake. In his generation, from then on, we didn't hug, we gave handshakes. And I remember when I was grown, I'd hug him and he'd be so uncomfortable. But I said, my boys and will never get too big that I'm not going to hug them because I wish I could have one more hug from my dad. And I didn't want any of my kids to say, man, I wish my dad had hugged me one more time, because he rarely ever did. Be a dad who hugs appropriately your children. Let them know how much you love them. You affirm them, that you're proud of them. Show that tender side. That's where strength really lies. I hope you have a great week. Hope you have a great discussion. Lord willing, we'll talk to you next week.